And yes, we're on. Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Morristown UU Fellowship. My name is Alison Miller, and I have the great privilege of serving this congregation as minister. And I'm joined here today in our service by Stearns Matthews, our Director of Music Ministries, and Lisa Vigiano. We are so delighted to welcome you back. And we are excited to be with all of you. A special shout out to Tom Moran and Alex West, our AV tech folks today. We know how important that is. And actually a shout out, you'll see on the order of service that Marjorie Wormser is our Sunday associate, but she is not feeling well today. And as we all know, when we don't feel well in a time of COVID, we stay home and take care of ourselves. And maybe Marjorie's watching online. So hi, Marjorie. We hope that you feel better, and take good care of yourself. Let us open with the following affirmation. And those in the room, I invite you to repeat after me, and online as well. It is good to be. It is good to be. It is good to be here. It is good to be here. It is so good to be here and online together. It is so good to be together here and online together. Welcome, everyone. I do have a few announcements to share. Our next Odyssey is planned for Sunday, February 20th at 1 p.m. here in the sanctuary, and there will also be a Zoom link to join. It's going to feature Elbjorg Birkenkamp. The Odyssey program is our monthly chance to hear the stories of one of our members and their sense of what is involved in leading a meaningful life. There will be a video presentation, and it will be followed by a time of questions and answers. So we'll have a chance to hear from Elbjorg and to ask questions of her. Second, the Lunch Bunch will resume meeting next Sunday. They meet up at the Florham Park Diner following the second service at 12:45 p.m. They meet every Sunday except for the Odyssey Sundays. You can keep that in your head. And they meet every Sunday except when we've closed down, contracted a bit in terms of COVID. But it'll be reopening next week at 12:45. And you can ask questions of Carolyn Schwartz, who is in the online realm directory. If you need help knowing how to look up a number, I can help you with that. Stearns can help you with that. Lots of folks can help you with that. And if you have any questions, you can also call the office. Third, today, we are launching a young adult group for members and friends ages 18 to 35 following the second service at 12:30 p.m. on Zoom. And the link is in the pastoral update that should be in your email inbox. And that link is also posted in that same letter on our public Facebook page. I have an announcement that just came in. We would love to invite you to join us in our hospitality ministry. If you would like to be the friendly face at the welcome table, or if you would like to be one of our ushers on a Sunday morning, then you can sign up to be a greeter or an usher. You can just visit the welcome table on your way out, or you can email welcome@muuf.org and let us know that you'd like to volunteer in that way. Finally, I want to let you know that our split collection today is split between our fellowship and Planned Parenthood of Morristown. We invite you to give via text or via our website or via cash in our basket or checks, or you can, and they can go in the basket, or they can be mailed in as well. Once again, welcome, welcome, welcome to one and to all. And now I invite those of you in this room to look at your order of service, and online you can join us as well. The order of service was in that email I sent this morning. We will recite our unison covenant by James Villa Blake as we light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And those who have your orders of service out, I invite you to keep them out. Stearns and I are going to be joining you in, let's do an antiphonal reading today. How about that? So the folks on the left side, it feels so good to have people back in the room as well as online, but we're beginning to have people return in safe ways. So those of you who are on this side of the room with me, would you join on the first lines with me, and those who are with Stearns on that side of the room, the second line, and we'll read together. And if you're at home, you can choose which one you prefer.
Or both.
Or both. You can read the whole thing. No. The words are on the screen as well. You are welcome here by Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner. You are welcome here if you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, or asexual, or resist labels completely.
You are whole and welcome here.
If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender,
you are whole and welcome here.
If you are confused about your sexuality, have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one,
you are whole and welcome here.
If you have had an abortion or an unintended pregnancy, given up a child, had a miscarriage, have AIDS or HIV, struggle with infertility or sexual dysfunction,
you are whole and welcome here.
If you have been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault,
you are whole and welcome here.
If you have made sexual decisions or had behaviors that you regret,
you are welcome here, and we will help you offer restorative justice and healing.
Your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are.
You are whole and welcome here.
As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love you, and fight for your rights.
We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity. And I invite you to join in our opening song, number 1053, How Could Anyone? Those of you in the room, I invite you to hum along behind your masks, and those of you at home, please sing along and join Lisa and I. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
I just want to invite people that today's topic may bring up episodes in your own life that are a challenge to deal with. And so I want to invite you to take care of yourself, whether you're in this room or at home. If you need to step out and come back in, whatever you need to do for self-care as we raise these important issues around reproductive justice, I invite you to do that. And a reminder that you can always make a pastoral appointment with me. The link is always at the bottom of that email I send every week, and you can go to www.calendly.com/Alison Miller and sign up for an appointment. Today we are talking about reproductive justice, which makes an effort to center the lives of women of color and people with marginalized identities. And we begin our service by including the voices of two women. Lisa Vigiano is joining me up here. We're going to share a little about the lives of these women and who they are, and then poems they've written, which will be included in an upcoming anthology about reproductive justice, which is going to be published next month. So let us open our ears to hear and witness their truth.
Carmen Barroso has been in the women's movement since her youth and has supported movement building throughout her distinguished career, beginning as a university professor and a founder of Women's Study Center in Brazil. In the 1990s, she was a director of the MacArthur Foundation, which supported women's organizations in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. She retired from her position as director of the Western Hemisphere of IPPF, but continues to be active for reproductive and sexual rights through writing, consulting, or serving in global committees of the UN, WHO, and UNFPA. When she received the UN Population Award, her speech dedicated it to the doctor who had made her abortion when she was a student, dreaming to overcome the Brazilian dictatorship. She started writing poetry in the last decade and has published some, mostly in Portuguese. Forgive Me, Father was written when the Pope pardoned women who had abortions. Forgive Me, Father by Carmen Barroso. Forgive me, Holy Father, because I was so ignorant I did not know how to protect myself. Forgive me, Father, because I was so stupid I thought it would never happen to me. Forgive me, Father, because I was so naive I believed you would take care of me. Forgive me, Father, because I was so young I did not know how to care for a new life. Forgive me, Father, because I was so weak. I could not convince you of my reasons. Forgive me, Father, because I was so dense. I did not appreciate the guilting power of the church. Forgive me, Father, because I was so powerless. I did not have many options. Forgive me, Father, because I felt so ashamed. I did not stop the priest from playing with my body.
And I invite you to just sit with me in the silence to create breath between these two poems. Megan Spencer is a Black feminist, scholar, and mother. She is a PhD student at the University of California, Santa Barbara in the United States, where she studies Black feminist ecology, specifically how Black women's visual art and literature show us connections between ecological crises and various forms of racial, sexual, and state violence. This poem was written for her daughter. It reflects on the author's experience of her daughter's birth and the process of coming to understand her precarious entrance to the world as a part of a pattern of Black women's disproportionate vulnerability to preterm labor and birth. Megan believes that poetry is a part of a Black feminist tradition of moving between thought and feeling, and has been a necessary aspect of healing from birth trauma. Reproductive justice includes the right to have children in healthy contexts. The poem is called On Mother's Day, Our First Together, by Megan Spencer. One morning in December, under the newborn moon, I am split open. In the operating room, a scalpel cuts a smile across my rounding belly. I come apart to make a way for you. I am flesh, then vessel, then canal, then empty. And just like that, we are two. Red, wet, and swollen-faced, you enter the world beneath glaring white light, dark curls slick and sticky like a baby bird, soft bones, ears folded shut. You too are there in this room, where everyone has a job to do. When you came, your lungs were still readying, and I needed more time to teach you how to breathe in this sharp, demanding world. I am trying to convince you to stay, how to make you choose this unforgiving place that snatches up anything loved by Black girls, especially Black girls themselves. I am afraid of everything. You are smaller than anything I have ever loved or held, barely a papaya in my open hands. Will you swim in the ocean one day? Will you eat salted tomato sandwiches in August, obsess about the way light moves through water? Will I have time to read you Lucille Clifton? There is language and color here. I promise, if you wait, there is more than these tangled and infinite wires and this constant threat of rupture. There is sky out there. I pray your tiny feet grow roots into this terrifying earth and not the moonless black night dusted with stars. And will you breathe with me? And now is the time for our offering. 50% will go to support this congregation and our ministries, and 50% will go to support Planned Parenthood. And before we begin with the musical offering, we have a video about 1.5 minutes called Faith Leaders Stand with Planned Parenthood.
My name is Reverend Timothy McDonald III.
Rabbi Lori Kaufman.
Reverend Darcy Roque.
Pastor Earl Fisher.
And I stand with Planned Parenthood.
It is our role as children of God to care for our fellow men and women.
Religion is really about enabling people to live lives of purpose and meaning.
To do all we can to make sure that those who are being oppressed will receive the type of support and advocacy they need.
As a person of faith, I believe that everybody should have access to health care.
Everybody is entitled to dignity.
It only makes sense for us to support the work of Planned Parenthood.
People need more access to health care, more access to contraception, more access to education, all the services that Planned Parenthood provides.
For some women, that's the only health care provider they have.
When people of faith,
People of faith.
People of faith.
When people of faith speak up for reproductive justice, compassion becomes the order of the day.
We build bridges, we come together.
The narrative changes
Silence is no longer an option for us.
because the faith message has been co-opted.
And the idea that there is just one monopoly on a religious voice, that is not true, that has never been true, and that will never be true.
everything about what Planned Parenthood does really speaks, in my mind, to Jewish religious ethical values.
For me, that's ministry.
And that's the work of Planned Parenthood.
Do. Don't tell me what to say. Please, when I go out with you, don't put me on display. You don't own me. Don't try to change me in any way. You don't own me. Don't tie me down, 'cause I'd never stay. I don't tell you what to do, I don't tell you what to say, so just let me be myself. That's all I ask of you. A 17-year-old Leslie Gore in 1963 sang this song well before the height of the women's liberation movement. And here we are today. Don't tell me what to say, and don't tell me what to do. Just let me be myself.
It is the time when we honor the milestones that have happened in the lives of our fellow congregants since we last met. Sometimes they come forward through cards, through emails, and through texts. Today, we have none that have come forward, but let us hold just a moment of silence for all of the joys and sorrows and the transitions that we know have happened in the lives of our fellow congregants. We celebrate the joys that happen in your life, and we seek to be companions with you in times of challenge and loss. And will you pray with me? Spirit of life, Spirit of siding with love, flow in us and through us and among us, and make of all of us embodied people who move through the world, allowing love to be visible through our acts of compassion, healing, and justice. May we build a world where every child has access to clean drinking water and nourishing food, where every child has access to a quality education and every family and individual to affordable housing and quality health care. May we build a world and a nation and a state and a county where women and trans folks have access to the fullness of reproductive justice. Where people have the opportunity to heal from trauma, from grief, from loss. Where men and women and trans folks and partners and families have a right to build their lives in the ways that they believe will best support health, love, and liberation. May we build a world and a nation where priests and politicians have no business in the middle of doctors' appointments, where people's lives and individual choices are respected, and where their ability to access quality health care and have their choices respected is a matter of public policy and public health. For in the middle of a pandemic, we know that the ability to access quality health care and the fullness of reproductive choice and justice is a matter that must include the well-being of all. None may be excluded, for else it isn't the spirit of siding with love. We hold in our hearts all the ways that families are made and created. Children come through birth, through adoption, through being interwoven with aunties and uncles. We celebrate all forms of families here. And may love guide us as we learn to do that with a greater faithfulness and fullness. All these things and so many others are our prayers, our longings, and our hopes. Amen, and blessed be one and all.
Meg Flather, a beautiful songwriter, grew up Unitarian, was born in the Philippines as a child of parents in the Peace Corps, writes about where we may find ourselves when we don't know what to do or where to begin. We are as strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night. Strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night. I'm drowning in the noise, staring at a screen, pounding on my desk, not saying what I mean. I shouted the loudest when they went low, sleepwalking through the day. Where did I go? We are as strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night. Strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night. The mighty are marching, I watch from inside. They organize, strategize, I hide. What binds us defines us. Who do I want to be? I look into the glass to remember me. We are as strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night. Once I flew into the wind, once I swam against the stream, once I sounded the alarm, once I memorized the dream, once I flew into the wind, once I swam against the stream, once I sounded the alarm, once I memorized the dream. pass. The loss is profound. These faces are calling me out of the shade. There's work to be done. Change is made. We are as strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night. Strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night. We are strong, we are wise, we are brave, we are strong, we are wise, we are brave. We are as strong as our weakest link, wise when our children think, brave when we light a stranger's night.
Our UUA Side with Love campaign is the public advocacy arm of Unitarian Universalists across the country harnessing love's power to stop oppression. We raise our voices to strengthen our democracy and prevent voter suppression. We promote climate justice. We amplify the movement for Black lives and racial justice. We side with humane immigration laws. We advocate for LGBTQIA+ rights, gender justice, and reproductive justice. Today, we join with hundreds of UU congregations around our nation who are holding Reproductive Justice Sundays during the 30 Days of Love campaign between Martin Luther King Jr. holiday and Valentine's Day. At the outset of this sermon, as I did earlier in the service, I want to acknowledge that our topic today is one that may be challenging for many. So do what you need to do for self-care. It comes with a legacy of shame, of grief, of trauma, of racism, and of inequity. This is what makes it difficult, but also very necessary to talk about. Too many religious communities do not celebrate human sexuality and instead make this natural, beautiful part of what it means to be human shameful. The emphasis is on abstinence only until marriage, and I'll add heterosexual marriage specifically, which is not a realistic path or even wise for many people. This simply leads to a situation where more teenagers who are sexually active don't know how to be safe and wind up with an unwanted pregnancy. I remember well that in my all-girls high school, there were so many prohibitions about what the teacher could say in our health and sex ed class that we never once heard the word condom, even by the time of high school graduation. It was one of the words the teacher wasn't allowed to say. They hinted using the word mechanism. There was a mechanism to prevent pregnancy, but what was that? Thanks to the About Your Sexuality AYS class that I was taught during junior high at my Unitarian Universalist congregation, I was able to connect the dots for myself and pass a note to my classmates. The UU sexuality curriculum today is not at all just about meeting the needs of students hitting puberty, although I can tell you that was a valuable resource. back then. It does that, but so much more. It is now called Our Whole Lives and covers developmentally relevant topics for young children all the way up through our elders. And next week, we are delighted to welcome Dr. Melanie Davis, the leader of the Our Whole Lives program at the UUA, into our pulpit. One great reason to enroll yourself or your children in an OWL class is to counter that shame and the conflicting emotions that arise from what so many have been taught about human development, gender identity, becoming sexually active, sexual orientation, and reproductive rights, including the right to terminate a pregnancy and coming to terms with some of the reasons for that choice. I remember well from a time I spent interning at Kings County Family Planning Clinic in Brooklyn, the wide and varied challenges women faced when it came to issues of contraception, STI prevention, and choosing whether or not to give birth to a child. I learned during that time the danger of me as a privileged white college student, the limited view I had on the issue up to that point. There were women who became pregnant who wanted the child but shared they couldn't afford it or the care of the pregnancy. There were women who were struggling with addiction and experienced hurdles when it came to implementing steps to prevent pregnancy and STIs. There were women who were recent immigrants whose spouse saw the request for a condom as a confession of cheating, which would result in violence. There were women who were working 2 jobs and already struggling with childcare issues and how to pay for the expense of the child or children they were already raising. There were women who came in for family counseling who were older than me at the time, who had never had someone explain all of their options. There were women who had been taught and whose partners believed that contraception was a sin and tried their best with the rhythm method. There was a woman who was HIV positive and wondered how much time she had left. This was the time before what was then that breakthrough AZT cocktail was widely available. As a minister, the learning has continued as people, women, men, and non-binary folks come to UU ministers' offices from within and beyond our walls. We are known as a safer place to be able to have these conversations, and this has been my experience here as well. There was the woman who wrestled with whether carrying a fetus to term and having the child of her abusive boyfriend would link her to him for the rest of her life in ways that were unwise and dangerous. There was the woman who was recently accepted to graduate school and was in discernment about which future she should move towards. There was the woman who was raped and wondered whether she would always see his face for the rest of her life. There was the woman whose own life was being threatened by the wanted pregnancy. And I'll be vulnerable and share a glimpse of my story, as we were asked to consider doing by Side of Love. I am the woman who desperately wanted children and who had the joyful news that she had twins. And then something went terribly awry and was told that she would have to terminate the life of one to have the possibility for one to survive or lose them both. The list goes on and on, friends. And again, so many stories around family planning and discernment about whether or not to have an abortion carries shame, but also pain, loss, and grief. Whether the fetus is terminated or whether the fetus is carried to term. And I have a child who did survive that procedure and wouldn't be here if I didn't have the courage to move forward with it. Sometimes the religious right accuses us of being pro-abortion. No one is pro-abortion. We would like to see greater access to contraception, for example, as a means to reduce the need for such a procedure. We are pro-access to abortion. We are pro the separation of church and state. We are pro politicians and priests having zero say in the matter. It is between the doctor and their patients, the woman or trans or non-binary person who is pregnant, and their partners if they are in the picture in healthy ways. Women have a right to self-determination over our bodies. It's an extension of our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. Individual Unitarian Universalists may feel differently about this issue for themselves personally. There are a number of folks right here in this community and in other Unitarian Universalist circles who would never opt for an abortion. That is the right choice for them. We support the choice to have or not to have an abortion and a world where the pregnant person is able to make that decision without coercion, force, punishment, or the like. We are here to move with individuals and families without judgment in ways that liberate us from shame and help us to name and heal from our grief and pain. It matters that we are vocal and visible in our support of abortion access today, and it has been important in the past, especially since the religious right has been so effective in capturing the media's attention and skewing the religious and moral perspective to the conservative one. By the way, let's be clear about how the religious right got involved with the anti-choice movement. At one point in history, the religion that took a stand against abortions was Catholicism, alongside their belief that contraception is also immoral. I'll name that there is an obvious contradiction between these two positions. When Roe v. Wade was passed by the Supreme Court legalizing abortion in 1973, many Baptists spoke in favor of the measure. For example, in 1971, delegates to the Southern Baptist Convention in St. Louis passed a resolution encouraging, and I'm quoting them, Southern Baptists to work for legislation that will allow for the possibility of abortion under such conditions as rape, incest, clear evidence of severe fetal deformity, and carefully ascertained evidence of the likelihood of damage to the emotional, mental, and physical health of the mother. And they reaffirmed that position in 1974 and again in 1976, 3 years after Roe. The interesting thing about this is that many people, and actually I thought this, believe the origins of the religious right as a political force was galvanized around Roe v. Wade. No, it wasn't. What was it about? It was about the right to have segregated schools. When school integration became the law of the land, white-only Christian schools were formed, and a number of white students left the public school classrooms. There were cases connected to whether these schools should be tax exempt, and the court cases came down on the side that racially segregated private schools do not qualify for tax exemptions under the new IRS codes in the wake of civil rights. Jerry Falwell and Paul Weyrich, the founder of the Heritage Society, were leaders of this movement. They realized that they couldn't have the public charge of the religious right uniting with political conservatives be about segregation. And they needed to find another issue to continue to tap into the anger that was fomenting amongst conservatives. Now, following Roe, there was a spike in legal abortions and probably a spike in healthier women. But people felt uncomfortable. So they capitalized on that and cultivated a second issue. Evangelicals began to organize around the rights of Christian schools, the rights of fetuses, and over and against, in their language, the rising tide of secular humanism. It's important that we understand that the history of racism and anti-choice movements are linked. They are one and the same. It is also true that our movements for reproductive rights must be intertwined with a commitment to anti-racism, intersectionality, and collective liberation. The language and the agenda of the religious left, us, has shifted from reproductive rights and pro-choice to pro-access and to reproductive choice. And let me share a little about the framework for reproductive choice. The term was coined in 1994 by a group of Black women in Chicago. They realized that the women's rights movement was led by middle and upper class white women, and that a movement that centered the needs of women of color, other marginalized women, and trans people needed to be begun. 3 years later, Sister Song was created, a national multi-ethnic reproductive justice organization that our UU Faith Action of New Jersey's Reproductive Justice Task Force works with, alongside of Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, and interfaith networks. Here is how Sister Song defines reproductive justice: a human right. RJ, reproductive justice, is based on the United Nations internationally accepted Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a comprehensive body of law that details the rights of individuals and the responsibilities of government to protect those rights. Reproductive justice is about access, not choice. Mainstream movements have focused on keeping abortion legal as an individual choice. That is necessary, but not enough. Even when abortion is legal, many women of color can't afford it or cannot travel hundreds of miles to the nearest clinic. There is no choice where there is no access. I did my internship at a congregation in Tulsa where one of the ministries was actually helping women cross state lines, pay for their hotel bills and travel, etc., just so they could have access. Can you imagine the cost to just gain access? Reproductive justice is not just about abortion, Sister Song writes. Abortion access is critical, and women of color and other marginalized women also often have difficulty accessing contraception, comprehensive sex education, STI prevention and care, alternative birth options, adequate prenatal and pregnancy care, domestic violence assistance, adequate wages to support our families, safe homes, and so much more. Unitarian Universalists have been on the front lines of reproductive rights and access, including contraception and abortion, for a long, long while. One example, the Women's Alliance of the First Unitarian Universalist Church in Dallas in 1969 realized that laws around abortion access needed to change and played a role in shaping the case that would be Roe v. Wade. A number of women in the Alliance were involved in writing the amicus brief for the case, and they were very involved in galvanizing support amongst women throughout Texas. We continue to locate ourselves on the front lines, and we must make the move from the legal choice to comprehensive access and reproductive justice, with a lens as to how women of color and other marginalized folks are impacted. That is about a right not to have a child, as well as to have a child in healthy and sustainable contexts. We need to learn and know the history of forced sterilization in our country of African Americans and Native Americans. We need to understand how legal access without financial access or a nearby abortion clinic is the equivalent of no access for so many. On one hand, we here in particular should celebrate that the New Jersey State Legislature passed the Reproductive Freedom of Choice Act last month in the face of so many assaults on Roe v. Wade occurring around the country. In the first 5 months of last year alone, there were 561 restrictions introduced across 47 states. And the Supreme Court may well overturn or gut Roe v. Wade this year. Many of us heard about the legislation in Texas limiting abortions to 6 weeks. But did you know that was one of 561 restrictions proposed in 47 states? So yes, let's celebrate the Reproductive Freedom of Choice Act that passed last month here. However, the legislation we passed in our state was a far cry from the original Reproductive Freedom Act that was put forth. It is still largely focused on individual choice and doesn't add requirements such as health insurance coverage of abortions or birth control. As long as some of us don't have reproductive freedom, then it isn't good enough. We need to celebrate a step forward, but not stop there. Many of us know personally in our lives and in our families' stories connected to fertility, to infertility, abortion, adoption, maternal death, stillbirths, rape, sterilization, all kinds of harrowing journeys. Let us affirm in this space that people have a right to bodily autonomy, to self-determination with the input of their health caregivers and intimate partners as to what is the pathway of health, sustainability, and love. They have a right to make decisions and to the joy and the grief around those decisions. It is a private matter, while ensuring that all have access is a matter of public health. So is the need to create affordable housing, quality public schools, and healthcare systems committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is interesting that the religious right, who has co-opted conservative politics, cares so much for the well-being of a collection of cells or a fetus from the first day of existence, but refuse to work for the well-being of the children they may one day become, or the well-being of the people who carry these children. We must raise our voices and amplify the leadership of women of color and others with marginalized identities and all of us, all of our stories, and continue to work for a day where love wins out and all have the choices and resources to thrive. Amen, and may it be so.
Our closing song is number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river
Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. You are never alone. Go forth and know that you are a blessing with all your hurts and all your incredible gifts. You are a blessing. Now go forth and share that light, that love that is you with the world.